We cling to memories as if they define us, but they really don't.
War never changes.
So what's your podcast about?
Oh, it's about psychology, true crime, supernatural stuff, the occasional paranormal or philosophical rant.
Well, maybe I could check it out sometime.
Good body with a dull brain is as cheap as life itself.
Spartans never retreat. Spartans never surrender.
Maybe there's no peace in this world. For us or for anyone else. I don't know. But I do know that as long as we live, we must stay true to ourselves.
Spartans! Prepare for glory!
I can't promise you that I will bring you all home alive. This I swear, before you and before Almighty God, that when we go into battle, I will be the first to set foot on the field, and I will be the last to step off, and I will leave no one behind, dead or alive. We will all come home together. So help me God.
This is your nautical lantern on the dangerous seas of darkness. Let's push off from the placid shore of the status quo and explore what's beyond the horizon. I am your host, BT, and this is Truth and Shadow, your podcast of the supernatural.
History tends to remember warriors in their most dramatic moments. The last stand, the final charge, the grand speech before battle. We remember Leonidas at Thermopylae not because he lived, but because he was willing to die. We preserve the image of the Spartan as the ultimate symbol of discipline, sacrifice, and martial perfection. All wrapped up in bronze armor, rigid training, unbreakable formations. Maybe that's part of the problem, because history often freezes men in the moment of conflict while ignoring what conflict actually does to them. Ancient Greece and Sparta in particular built one of the most rigorous warrior cultures the world had ever seen. From childhood, Spartan males were shaped into instruments of war, conditioned to endure pain, suppress weakness, and subordinate individuality to the needs of the state. It was an extraordinary system, but it was also deeply costly. Because creating effective warriors has never simply been about teaching men how to fight. It raises a harder question. What happens after? What happens when the battle ends, when the campaign is over, when the discipline that forged survival no longer answers the deeper psychological burden left behind? This is where the broader Greek world becomes so fascinating. Because while Sparta is often remembered for combat, Greek civilization as a whole understood that warfare was not only part of the human experience. Across the ancient world existed parallel structures of philosophy, ritual medicine, and pilgrimage. Systems not merely for military victory, but for reintegration into culture. Men fought wars, but they also sought healing. They pursued a deeper meaning, reflection, restoration. The same civilization that produced elite warriors also produced temples of healing, schools of philosophy, and cultural mechanisms for processing suffering. That duality matters. It suggests that even in one of history's most battle-hardened societies, there remained an understanding that conflict alone could not sustain civilization. Strength required something beyond endurance. It required recovery. And perhaps this is where modern society often falls short. We continue to admire resilience, ambition, competition, and toughness. We glorify the external struggle in everything from politics to personal identity. But we often neglect equally necessary structures of return, the spaces where individuals process hardship, rebuild coherence, and recover meaning in a normal, everyday life of civilization. The ancient Greeks, for all their flaws, recognized that men cannot live perpetually in a state of war without consequence. Without restoration, the warrior eventually fractures, and without reflection, strength becomes instability. And without a return, survival itself can become another form of loss. So perhaps the real lesson from Sparta is not simply how men were trained to stand firm in battle. Maybe it is that even the strongest civilizations required more than warriors. They required pathways back from war. And perhaps that observation reaches far beyond ancient history. The modern world, despite all its technological sophistication, often functions like a culture trapped in perpetual conflict. Political division, ideological warfare, economic pressure, social fragmentation. These forces may not resemble bronze spears and shield walls, but they place extraordinary strain on the human psyche nonetheless. We are trained to compete, to endure, to survive. But far less often are we taught how to process suffering once it has marked us. How to reintegrate after hardship, how to return from psychological battlefields, how to remain whole in a world that increasingly rewards constant struggle. This may be why so many today appear exhausted, restless, spiritual, disoriented, not because they are weak, but because endurance alone is an insufficient model for human flourishing. The statistics show that once every 80 minutes, a veteran in the United States commits suicide, and 5% of all homeless in the US are veterans. The Greeks, though, in their own imperfect way, understood that civilizations depend not only on producing strength, but the need to maintain their humanity. Sure, warriors may defend society, but wisdom, healing, reintegration preserve it. And in remembering that, perhaps we recover something essential. That the measure of a culture is not only found in held wealth, it prepares people for conflict, but whether it remembers how to bring them home. Today, nothing seems to be untouchable. Fast, accessible knowledge replaces wisdom. Force replaces restraint. Once even power knew when to stop and take a breath. In the ancient world, Asylum meant untouchability. It was not a means of escape nor of absolution, but a sacred interruption. Certain places could not be violated. Certain lives could not be seized without reflection. Violence was forced to pause. Not because a form of justice had disappeared, but because the gods were believed to be present. This conversation begins with a forgotten question. What happens to justice when nothing is sacred anymore? Today we bring back a guest who is tackling this very issue. He is the Threshold Warden, the Sanctuary Spokesman, and Healer of Disorder. Welcome back, Dr. Edward Tick, to Truth and Shadow Podcast.
Thank you very much, Brandon. I'm honored to be back with you, and that was a very beautiful and moving beginning to set our theme for today. So thank you for going so deep to open us.
Yeah. Before we dive into the main topic, let's Let's talk about what you've been up to since our last conversation and some of the things that you've been working towards.
Well, thank you for that invitation. So, in addition to working with and promoting this new book, Passage to Poros, which I have to do very busily because we don't know if our friends out there know that most of the book business and promotion has left the publishing companies and turned over to the author. So the authors don't have just to write, but they have to promote, create events, look for reviews, and all that. So that's one of the things I've been doing was trying to help my new baby begin walking through the world. In addition to that, as we've shared in the past, I am working by Zoom with Russia and Ukraine. And so I'm continuing to do that, especially with Russia. Well, Ukraine has been under such heavy bombardment, it's really hard for them to even be connected. But my Russian colleagues are very concerned about what's going on, hate what's happening in their part of the world, and really want to bring whatever wisdom we've gained from the spiritual healing of trauma to their world. And since we're going to be talking about Passage to Poros, my Russian publisher is going to translate and publish this book in Russian because two things. One, in Russia, they are very committed and concerned with accessing and working in the deep unconscious and with archetypal and mythological material. Their culture is very old, and so they relate to that best. This isn't in the English version, but this island of Poros in Greece and Russia had a very intimate relationship back 300 years ago. Russia and Greece were allies during the Ottoman and Turkish wars. And so Russia actually had a naval base and a military encampment on Poros back then. I didn't put it, well, almost nobody knows about it, even on the island. There's just a place called the Russian Bay, and that's where it's a beautiful beach now. What do you know? And there's one half rotten historical marker there that sort of tells part of the history. So it's really not very well known or honored on Poros now. But when my Russian publisher found out, they were so enthusiastic. Oh, we want to publish the book here to help our people learn how to work mythologically, and we can help restore a lost piece of Russian history. So that's very exciting. And part of my joy in doing this work is discovering almost new facts and events and experiences like this, and digging up the past for the treasures it has to offer us. So I've been doing that as well. My therapy practice is very busy now, and unfortunately, in the old days, we were not supposed to talk about politics during therapy sessions. Now, what do you know? Every single session is at least partially about politics and the fears and the breakdown and the trauma triggering and wounding that everybody's going through with our contemporary conditions. So it hurts. Everybody's in pain. Everybody's scared. And the work has gotten more challenging because of it, because all of us feel so helpless. So that's a summary of where I've been in the last several months since I've seen you.
The Greek islands, there's just so many of them. And to be honest, before I started talking to you, I had no idea that Poros was one of them. One of my favorite ancient cultures was on Minos. The Minoans drew me from a young age that, like the Egyptians might some other people of my same age. But I knew that there was, the island of Santorini, Delos, but I had no idea about Poros. And I think that this is an interesting island because it has its own mythology. Can you go into that a little bit for me?
Yes, I can. I love Crete and Santorini also, by the way. Also for our friends out there, Greece has more than 1,000 islands. Most of them are small and uninhabited. Many of them have only a few people, peasants, farmers, shepherds. Um, I think, if I recall, about 200 are uh, people are. Damn, see, I'm losing my words now. About 200 of the islands are well established, settled, occupied, um, and really, as you rightly point out, only a few of them are famous, like Crete and Santorini, like Delos. People go to Delphi. So a few of the major islands have been profoundly developed as modern tourist attractions, and people literally by the millions go there. Greece has a population of 10 million. In 2025, they had 35 million tourists. And also because of the world financial crisis and how Greece was caught in it and victimized by it, um, and their government is unfortunately not visionary. What a surprise! Um, like others we know, so they're actually trying to push the tourism up to 40 million a year. That's their goal. So I also want to say to our friends, if you want to go to Greece, go soon because it is getting more expensive and more crowded, and some of the sacred sites are being damaged. Okay, so with that being said, we'll go to Poros. Poros is a small island. It's only got about 2,000 permanent residents. About well, several hundred of them are international. So there are Americans, Brits, refugees from the Middle East, um, from Bangladesh, a lot of people from Albania, some Russians, some Israelis. And we'll talk about this. Poros has been a sanctuary island for 3,000 years, and people still use it for sanctuary. And the residents of Poros really embrace the spiritual obligation of offering sanctuary and practicing what the Greeks call philoxenia, which is guest friendship, being especially welcoming and friendly to us to strangers, so they become friends. And Poros is famous throughout Greece as being one of the friendliest island that practices philoxenia to an extreme degree. And let me say a word about that word, since you and I love words. Why not? They don't get lost in our aging brains. Philoxenia, we don't have that word in English. We have its opposite. We have xenophobia. Same Greek root. Xenos means a stranger, and phobia, of course, phobos, phobia. So that's fear of the stranger. And we in the United States have a profound xenophobia, and look how it's ripping our country to shreds right now. Isn't it interesting that Greece has both words? Friendship and making the stranger a guest, and also being afraid of the stranger, if it must be. Whereas in our modern English, we only have being frightened of the stranger, but not welcoming them and making them one with us. So that's another indication of the values that are in Greece and how some of them that are most beautiful and meaningful have endured for thousands of years. So a little more about Poros. Most people, whether they've been to Greece or not, know about the Acropolis and the Parthenon, Athena's major sanctuary. And people know about Delphi, and Apollo, and where Apollo sat and gave the oracles. And many people also know about Eleusis, where that was the sanctuary of Demeter and Persephone, where the mysteries were practiced and where the ancients believed that that's where Persephone was taken down into Hades, and Demeter went there to grieve until she was returned. Those are three very famous places. They are quite restored and rebuilt to attract tourists, and they really do get millions of people a year. Right? So the main sanctuary of Demeter, the main sanctuary of Athena, the main sanctuary of Apollo, all rebuilt and well known. Almost nobody knows that little Poros, which is only an hour and a half by boat from Athens Port Piraeus, so it's really pretty easy to get to. Little Poros was the main sanctuary in the ancient world for the god of the sea, Poseidon. And presently, well, it's a volcanic island that juts out of the Saronic Gulf. There's only the harbor village down below, and well, it's a 3-hour hike if you want to walk up to the top of the island. I have done it. I'm getting old, but I've done it many times, including having some extraordinary experiences along the way. On top of that, of the pinnacle, it's only ruins now. It's just scattered ruins and foundations, and almost no information about where you are. But it was the main sanctuary of Poseidon in the entire Mediterranean in the ancient world. It was as big, as developed as the Acropolis is, with as many temples and priests' quarters and dining halls and ritual spaces, and it had an adjoining town for all the employees and the priests to support it. So it was really important in the ancient world. And it's been nearly forgotten and undeveloped. And so far, well, the tourist industry hasn't rebuilt the sanctuary, and the island is trying very hard to protect itself from exploitation. One of the other things that's been going on recently is that the fish farms have tried to come in. And the island people have been protesting for years and petitioning their government, and it looks like they stopped the fish farms. If fish farms came in, it would destroy the water and destroy the island as a sanctuary and even a place for tourism. So the people are very committed to trying to preserve its character, its heritage, its desirability as a place to visit. And with all that said, they don't know that much about their own mythological history. The children in school aren't taught that right up there on the mountain above them, there was the main sanctuary of Poseidon, who was so important in the ancient world because of the sea, of course. There's a military academy on the island that presently, it was the summer palace of King Otto in the 1800s when he became the first king of modern Greece. Now it was turned into, it became the island's, Greece's major naval base during the World Wars, and now it's been transformed into an officer training school. So it's a main place for training the midshipmen and the chief petty officers. So hundreds of people train there, and there's a church of Saint Nicholas there in the academy, because Saint Nicholas is the patron saint of sailors, and he protects the ships and the people at sea. Well, the evolution of mythology in the Western world was Poseidon was the god of the sea, and when Christianity took over the place of the pagan gods, the powers were transferred from the gods to either Jesus or Mary or the saints. So Saint Nicholas, Poseidon became Saint Nicholas. And so he's not quite as divine as a god, but he's up there. And he, even though he's, there are altars to Saint Nicholas on every Greek ship, and there's a Church of Saint Nicholas at the military academy, they don't teach their recruits that they're on the island of Poseidon and they are being initiated as officers in the Greek Navy on this place, in this great tradition. So there have been many times when I've met recruits. Also, as you know, I bring warriors on the journeys, and So often we've had incredible encounters between the Greek naval recruits and experienced American veterans, comparing stories, supporting each other, talking about the warrior tradition, what's similar and what's different, and how can we support each other, and also initiating them. You're becoming an officer in the Greek Navy. Well, go up to the sanctuary and don't just have a picnic and drink some beers up there, as some people do, but realize you're in a sacred place where what you're doing was sanctified in the ancient world and has been considered sacred and of utmost critical importance to the people ever since. So that's a little bit about Poros.
Yeah, no, that's good. There's a couple of Greek terms that I think apply. I do believe you mentioned in your book one of them, and it's the word asilia. But there was another one that kind of caught my eye because I remember this from, I enjoy reading the Septuagint, so it's got, it's Greek. So we get these words like, I'm going to mispronounce it. It's the Phygedeuteron. And that's the place where people could go as a refuge if they were like, they accidentally killed somebody, like a, not an intentional manslaughter, but you accidentally, so you go somewhere you can escape. But anyways, Poros was one of these places. And I think that's kind of an interesting idea that you can go and have a place of refuge.
Poros was a very important place of refuge, and the words you're mentioning are really important. And for our friends listening, asilia is the Greek word meaning that we translate as sanctuary. Our word asylum comes directly from that. And okay, so regarding your point, the ancient Greek tradition had, yes, they had sanctuary for protection. They had means for cleansing and purifying from impure acts, whether they were accidental, where you could go and be cleansed of the stain and the guilt and the responsibility of taking a life. They also had such sanctuaries for people who had killed on purpose. You could also go into sanctuary and be safe and safe from harm, and also be put through sacred rituals for healing and atonement and cleansing of the bloodstain. Now, on Poros, that sanctuary of Poseidon up on the mountain, that was what we're talking about. That was a sanctuary where you could go and have inviolable safety. And the Bible also talks about offering sanctuary and declares what a sacred act it is and how important it is. So we can also make this relevant to our times because sanctuary has been violated much in our country's history. Churches bombed, but right now it's being violated monstrously all over the country, and innocent people being dragged out of sanctuary. This, according to the Bible, and according to the Greek tradition, and according to actually world spiritual traditions, sanctuary is sacred. And if somebody is asking for protection and help and putting down their weapons or grieving a wrong, then they are under divine protection and should be helped to heal and to reconcile and atone. And this was done extensively in the ancient world, and sometimes in ours, but not now. So we really need to understand this value and bring it back. There was I tell the story of Demosthenes in my book. So the most famous experience of sanctuary on Poros was the famous Athenian orator and philosopher Demosthenes, who people have heard of him because he's the one who practiced speaking with his mouth full of marbles. That's mostly what we know about him. When Philip and Alexander of Macedon took power in Greece and they were taking over the rest of Greece, Demosthenes was fiercely independent and committed to freedom. And so he preached to the Athenian people to resist Philip. And so they did fight back against Philip, and they were defeated. And Demosthenes then had to flee for his life. he fled around various parts of Greece, and he came to Poros, and he went up into the sanctuary and asked for asylum there and was granted it. The Macedonians followed him there. And even though we might think of them as ICE or the stormtroopers of their era, they didn't violate the sanctuary. They knew that he was under, anybody in there was under divine protection. So they waited outside and they laid siege. We're not letting anybody in or out, but you can't go out. and we'll starve you if we have to. Finally, Demosthenes agreed to surrender, but he said, because he knew he would be executed if he did, before I surrender, I would like to write a farewell letter to my family. So the Macedonians said, yeah, go ahead. And they teased him and taunted him because he took out his pen and he was nervously chewing the tip of his pen while he was writing the letter. It was poison. So and even then, as he started to die, he said to the Macedonians, now you can come in and take me, because I can't die in Poseidon's temple. That would profane the temple. So carry me out. So I'll die in your arms as you wanted. So that's the most famous story of Asylum. But really, from my heart, the Porotes, the Poros people have been practicing granting asylum for 3,000 years. During the population expulsion and exchange with Turkey in the beginning of the 1900s, lots and lots of the refugees from Turkey came to the islands and established a community on Poros, and it became a permanent community. They're beloved there. Many, this is going back to the 1990s when Albania was under dictatorship and when their country was falling apart and so many people fled. 1 million Albanians fled to Greece, and lots of them came to Poros. Some of my closest and beloved friends on Poros came to Poros from Albania during that retreat. And when you ask them, what's your nationality? They say, well, Poros and Albanian, it's the same. We are both. We're utterly at home here, and we've been safe, we've been embraced. We consider Poros our home. And what about your children? Oh, no problem, they're both. And we raise them with both languages and both cultures. And the Albanians presently are the second largest ethnic group in Greece because of that refugee issue. Also, during plague, during wars, there's a beautiful monastery on the island called the Monastery of the Virgin of the Life-Giving Springs. Nice story. That island was created in the 1700s by the Metropolitan of the Greek Orthodox Church, who had a kidney disease that nobody could know how to heal. So he came to the island and he drank the waters of a sacred spring and it healed him. And so where that spring comes out of the mountain and on the island where he had his healing, he built this monastery, and that's why it's called Virgin of the Life-Giving Spring. The spring returns life, and so these have been used as healing waters for hundreds of years. And that monastery has also practiced sanctuary. It has been it was the first orphanage in Greece for the children orphaned during the Greek War of Independence in the 1820s. So it's been an orphanage and a place of refuge and a place for the handicapped, and when plague was stricken for hundreds and hundreds of years. So all these ways are ways that Greece in general in ancient times and Poros since ancient times has been practicing these beautiful values that we're talking about.
Yeah, something that I find interesting is that within like a Judeo-Christian or even Islamic worldview, there is a form of accountability when God knows what's going on. And I think that's interesting because it's not an isolate belief. The ancient Greeks had this too, where they understood quite well that judgment was more than just among men, it was transcendent and not just of an institutionalization. How does that idea there, how does accountability change when we understand that there's more to being judged than by our fellow man?
What a good question. Thank you. Okay. Not in this book, but in my other books about our military and veterans, as you and I have talked about, and also in my book Soul Medicine about the Greek tradition, I looked very closely at ancient Greek mythology and what it says about our suffering. So we call post-traumatic stress disorder a mental disorder now. Of course, it's in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, and people think of it as a mental disorder or mental illness. When we study the ancient Greek tradition, well, that's not how they thought about it. The ancient Greeks had the divine powers called the Furies. The Furies were the forces of guilt and punishment that haunted people when they did wrong. And they were divine powers. And the Greeks thought of that had a very strong ethical system, as you're rightly saying, our other spiritual traditions try to give us. And the Greeks taught that we are ultimately answerable not to each other, but to higher values and higher powers, and that the higher powers are personal and active, and they will turn against us if we when we are culpable, when we are responsible for doing harm, and we don't admit it and don't atone for it or aren't purified for it. So there were many different sacred practices and places to go to be accountable. Well, as we would say, can I say it, to own your shit? Right? And to try to reconcile. And many of the stories we have from both history and mythology are these stories about people being tortured and chased by the Furies until they either atoned or paid a price for their wrongs, or turned themselves over to higher powers, higher levels of adjudication. That happened famously in the story of. Hold on. Sorry, Orestes. We won't tell the whole myth because that'll take the rest of our time. But okay, Orestes' father was Agamemnon. Agamemnon killed his sister to go to get the winds to go to the Trojan War. The mother was Clytemnestra, who was angry and resentful for 10 years and killed Agamemnon when he came back. Orestes was the child of, talk about complicated dysfunctional families. The child of a father who killed his sister and a mother who killed his father. And Apollo told him the only way to get clean was to kill your mother for killing your father. So he did that. And so we have amazing plays that are, the Orestia by Aeschylus. I highly recommend them. Agamemnon, the Libation Bearers, and the Eumenides are the three plays that tell the whole story from Agamemnon returning and the pain and the rage in the family that's left over. War trauma, what do you know? Post-war trauma, and everybody's afflicted and through the generations. And then later, when Orestes kills the mother, then the Furies chase them. And that's the third play, the Eumenides. And I really highly recommend that to anyone who wants to study and understand the psychospiritual or archetypal dimensions of what we call post-traumatic stress disorder. Read that play and it's all there. It's all there. The rage, the pain, the mistrust, the betrayal by authority, the confusion, the homelessness and helplessness, and running all over the earth, homeless and wandering and looking for sanctuary. Finally, Orestes comes to Athens, throws himself at Athena's feet, and asks her to judge. And this was actually in mythology the beginning of our jury system, of our judicial system. Because Athena said, Furies, back off. He's not your food. From now on, we're going to have impartial listening to stories and rationally and impartially judging right and wrong, good and bad. And we're ending the cycle of blood guilt, of taking an eye for an eye, which, as Gandhi told us, the whole world becomes blind. So actually, in mythological time in ancient Greece, we were told by their divine powers to stop the blood guilt, stop punishing and torturing people, and become fair and rational and moderate and compassionate in when people have done wrong, and help them. So Athena actually said, okay, Orestes is forgiven. The homicide was not good, but understandable, justifiable. And the Furies said, well, what about us? What about us? And Athena said, if you let him go, then we will build an altar for you here in Athens, and you won't be just the Furies anymore. You'll become the Graces, Eumenides. And you and I both know this, Brandon, my friend. When a veteran or anybody struggles with their traumatic wounding and really does the work to heal it, oh gosh, they become the most beautiful, generous, compassionate, open-hearted, open-minded people. So we see people transforming from being possessed by the Furies to being full of the Graces. And it doesn't happen on medications. And when we're only controlling the symptoms, then we're dependent on the medications to keep the symptoms under control, and we haven't achieved really deep inner healing. But when we can transform the Furies to the Graces, as that story modeled, as Jesus modeled, and heal the terrible traumatic wounds through psycho-spiritual, communal, ritual practices.
The power of healing in the ancient Greek world belonged to Asclepius. And one of the major healing rites, and you go into this in Passage of Poros, is encomesis, dream incubation. Can we talk about that for a little bit and its importance in healing the body, the psyche, and the soul?
Sure, thank you for that invitation. It's really important. Whew. Okay. Asclepius, as you rightly said, was the Greek god of healing. He was the son of Apollo. Apollo was the god of medicine, so Apollo had medical theory, and Asclepius had the practice. One of the meaning of Asclepius' names was everlastingly gentle. So he had really good bedside manner. His healing tradition, we have records going back to 1400 BC from northern Greece, where the tradition started. And the word you use is enkimesis in Greek, and it's translated as dream incubation. Dream incubation is analogous to Native American vision questing. Okay. And vision quests, we work with shamans, with facilitators. We prepare for a long time. We're trying to address deep spiritual conditions. And when we're ready, we go out into the wilderness and we stay out there from fasting and praying and waiting and watching and doing nothing from 1 to 4 days, waiting for dreams or visions from the divine to help us and heal us and show us how to act and how to take care of ourselves. Dream incubation is the same thing, almost. At first, it was done in the mountains and caves in early times. Later, as the practice spread to the entire Mediterranean world, so we know that there were over 320 Asclepia, and they stretched from Egypt all the way to the Iberian Peninsula, and from the Caucasus Mountains down to northern Africa. And it was specifically holistic and psycho-spiritual communal healing practice there in ways that we've pretty much lost. People would go into the sanctuaries. Well, first, I'll back off for a second. Hippocrates, whom we call the father of scientific medicine or modern medicine, he was the son and the grandson of Asclepian priests, and he grew up on the island of Kos, where there was a major sanctuary to Asclepius. So he grew up there. He was trained by his father and grandfather, and he didn't become an Asclepian priest himself, but he understood it, he knew it, and what he did was take all of those case histories that were sacred medicine, and he made them scientific and reinterpreted them. So that was the beginning of scientific medicine, but it was in tandem with spiritual medicine. So doctors then would refer people to the Asclepia and go for drinking incubation. When people were afflicted, they were requested to go to human healers first, and don't go to the Asclepia until you can't find human healing, because the gods are really busy. They've got a lot to do. It's a lot of work to run the universe, so we should help each other as much as we can before we say we can't do it and let's turn it over to divine powers. So when people got to that point, they did go into the Asclepia. Now, the Asclepia were really ideal holistic healing sanctuaries. And some of ours, like Asylum Institute or Omega Institute, are partially modeled on Asclepia. Because in Asclepia, when you went in, there was no charge, perfect sliding scale. So anybody could go. Slaves as well as emperors went, women as well as men went. You didn't pay until you left as a gift for the healing you received. And if you're a slave, you could give an apple and that was enough. But Marcus Aurelius, the famous Roman emperor, we know he had 2 dream incubation experiences. And what did he do? He built a whole new building for the Asclepion. So perfect sliding scale. Give what you can afford and nothing in advance, and everybody's welcome. So that is different from ours. Secondly, in ours, if you go to Omega or Esalen, well, you might take a week-long workshop on yoga or dream work or creative writing or meditation, and you're usually going for one, even though the center has all of them, and you also get massages and hot tubs and good healthy stuff like that. When you went into the sanctuaries in Greece, not only were you not charged so you could stay as long as you needed to, but they had all of those practices. They had hydrotherapy. There were always hot springs, and psychotherapy, and psychodrama, and astrology, and astronomy, and gymnastics, and nutrition, and therapeutic touch and massage. And by the way, as a woman masseuse on Poros who studied ancient massage the way Hippocrates did it, and she gives the very best massages anybody has ever had. So my groups always want to be with her and get an ancient Olympian massage, and they come out glowing. Okay. Now, back to Hippocrates for a moment. He said, all illnesses begin in the soul and end up in the body. And our illnesses derive from our soul wounds that accumulate over time. And then when they aren't healed, then the body, well, we have the famous book by Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps the Score. Right? Okay. Well, that's what that's what Hippocrates is saying with an amendation. Yes, the body keeps the score, and we must penetrate through the symptoms to the soul and the soul wound to bring the healing, or the symptoms will not resolve. They'll come back in another way. So in dream incubation, and by the way, we have in my books, I do quote some of the incubation experiences that ancient people had, as well as I have 3 books now on ancient Greece and where I use the incubation tradition. And so I also report incubation experiences that modern people have, because we replicate this practice with incredible, incredible power and success. So in the dreams, in the incubation, you're preparing for a long time. You're identifying the needs you have. You're in a shared community supporting you with some other pilgrims seeking their healing. You have facilitators experienced in this, and we have the stories and the mythology and the ancient stories behind it. And the Asclepia were loaded with these so that people knew the old stories, so that it set their psyche the expectation of something similar is going to happen to you. And then people go to bed after the prayer and fasting and preparation. And in ancient times, they would stay in incubation for as long as they needed to. The longest I've ever had anybody stay in incubation is 16 hours. So it can be a long time. Usually people do 6, 8, 10 hours. But it's really incredible. The dreams people have are really mind-blowing, extraordinary in complication, in what they reveal, in the soul material that comes to the surface. And people in ancient times and now too, sometimes people experience a spontaneous healing in the dream, including physical healing. So you and I are both concerned, and both beloved of our veterans. Warriors loved this tradition. And even the Roman warriors loved it. When Rome conquered some of the Greek cities and destroyed the city, they protected the Asclepia and they used them. So we have records from ancient times of one example, for example, a warrior who had an arrowhead embedded deep in his shoulder and it was inoperable. He did a dream incubation, and in the dream, he saw Asclepius come to him and open his shoulder and take the arrowhead out. And when he woke up in the morning, he had never had a real operation. He had a dream surgery, which we've heard of. There's psychic surgery. But the arrowhead had popped out as a result of the dream imagery. That's one example. Another warrior example I remember was a man who had been blinded in battle. And he dreamed of Asclepius, who told him to go to the sacred altar, and I don't remember the exact prescription. It was something like, grind up pine cones and collect ashes from my sacred fire and make a poultice and spread them on your eyes and your sight will be restored. And it was. So these are a couple of the ancient examples. And as I said in my book, there are lots of modern examples, and many with our veterans, because as you know, I take veterans on these journeys, sometimes mixed groups and sometimes only warrior journeys. And so we do these incubations as well. And it does bring people extraordinary levels of awareness of how and why their soul has been bothered, and imagery for gaining integration, like alchemical imagery that reintegrates what has been blown apart by their traumatic experiences. This, my earlier book called The Practice of Dream Healing, explores this tradition extensively with a full history of the early Asclepian tradition before introducing its use in the modern times. I just want to share that that book is also translated in Greek, and the Greek healing community considers it a classic there, and it has sparked somewhat of a healing renaissance, because I'm saying this humbly, really, my eyes fill with tears of honor and joy about this. The Greeks say, how is it that this strange American who is a Bronx street kid found us at our tradition and practiced it and brought this back, and so that he's practicing it and giving us permission to return to the ancient ways and re-explore and redevelop them. So there really is, and I'm not the only one, I'm not taking that much credit, but there is a renaissance going on in Greece of restoring ancient healing practices for the modern world and integrating them with both medicine and psychology.
Yeah, there's all sorts of things here. I'm just gonna leave this as the last question here, and so I'm gonna wrap it up into a nice little bow. But ancient Greece has so many amazing things that it has to offer today. You know, Carl Jung had brought back the power of synchronicities. You know, he didn't invent this; he kind of just rediscovered it. This is something the ancient Greeks had. Uh, Animal guides. This is not a native indigenous only tradition. The ancient Greeks believed in animal guides. And of course, they had the oracles, because you did mention Delphi earlier. So, you know, the Delphi oracles, sure. But there's so much more going on. And there's so much sacred space and sanctuary in ancient Greece that we really don't see today. And I say that because what kinds of things do we see as sacred space? Well, for many, a common Christian today would it's an old grocery store turned into a church. How sacred is a grocery store? Really, it's where we do all of our shopping for food, right? So it doesn't really have this body of sacred space. And so we're having to heal modern wounds today in a place that doesn't feel like it's sanctuary. You know, the Asclepion were not modern hospitals. They don't look like the ER room that we would see today. It's completely different. Like you said, springs, mud baths, things that were designed to help a person relax because the soul needed to relax to let a sickness go. And so how is it that today in this modern world, besides the obvious of dealing with this trauma, what can the ancient world, the ancient sanctuary, help us find this serenity in our fractured world today?
Well, thank you for that question and observation, and thank you for your own observations about what Greece did offer in ancient times. And we could talk for hours about that. To your important points, I have a 3-word recipe for what we need for healing: spirituality in community. You're right, our hospitals are not healing sanctuaries, even though many people who work in a hospital want to be healers and do the best they can. But they're not. And all of this, the Asclepia were in the countryside, surrounded by beautiful nature. And now nature deprivation has been put into the DSM. People don't even go outside. So we need to resacralize, resanctify our lives and our spaces. And we can study the Greek and other spiritual traditions to see how they did it, to make space sacred, to create community that supports the sacred space and that serves it, and that is able to be in ritual healing work with us, because it didn't happen. They didn't have they didn't practice individual psychotherapy like we do, and they did keep everybody's wounds were public. In fact, the word idiot doesn't mean somebody who's ignorant or stupid. It meant somebody who kept themselves away from other people, who isolated. So we are social creatures and we need to be in community. So we need healing community that's beautiful, that's in sacred space, that is reserved for nothing else but this healing enterprises, and that recognizes that what's coming through our body and all our symptoms it's the way our soul cries out its anguish when we don't hear it or don't understand it or haven't given it the right attention that it needs. So we need to restore that and restore that awareness of the union of body and soul that has been broken and we've been losing for 2,000 years. And many of us are trying in our little ways to bring that back. So I could go on and on. There are the ancient world and ancient spiritual traditions, not just the Greek tradition, of course, offer us profound and beautiful and complex visions for how to do healing framed in the sacred, using ritual in community and together, and recognizing that our wounds are communal and we need to help each other. And it is possible. It's very possible because it's been done by many different societies through the ages. And it's really also very important to realize how much we've lost, so that where we are now is a fallen condition, but we can get up again. If we practice the community and spirituality and goodwill all together toward each other. And now I'm going to quote Buddha. Hatreds never cease by hatreds in the world. By love they cease. This is an ancient law. So bring love to the healing enterprise in community altogether. And it can be done.
What's something that we could do every day to give ourselves a little bit of sacred space?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Begin your day that way. I wake up early with the dawn. I pray. I meditate. I feed the birds and watch the birds. I don't let myself read the news until I'm really awake and feel fortified inside. Whenever the weather lets me, it can be bad and cold too, but I get outside and connect with nature. Listen to music. And we're talking about dream incubation. You can incubate yourself. Friends out there who are listening. We don't have to go to Greece, and you don't have to be under the guidance of Asclepius. It's great if you can and if you do, but you can incubate yourself at home and create sacred space. You can do preparation. You can set your intentions. You can look carefully at your symptoms. You can ask yourself, what is coming from my soul? You can call your animal spirits to help and support you. And you could put aside a day or a weekend where turn off the computer, turn off your cell phone. Just nurture your own spirit with whatever feeds you, with good food and music and poetry and art, and then incubate yourself. Light candles, burn incense or sage, purify your bedroom, write your healing intentions on a piece of paper, put it under your pillow and lay down and stay there and wait and trust and watch, including, as you said, Brandon, watch the synchronicities because they're guidance. So back, just putting Jung together with this ancient tradition, Jung taught us to seek big dreams, not ordinary everyday dreams, but the rare big dreams that have real spiritual presence. That's what dream incubation was doing. Not ordinary dreams, but through all these sacred practices to facilitate a big dream for the afflicted person. And as we've said, we have records of thousands of them. It works.
Thank you, Dr. Tick. I appreciate you coming on my show and having some time to talk about this with me. I appreciate that.
And thank you, Brandon. I appreciate you and the work you do. The great questions you ask. The careful reading you do. Thanks. It's good to be with you. Thank you very much.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Thank you for listening. This is a free podcast based upon the value for value model. If you find value in this, or any episode, you can return that value by liking the show, subscribing to this channel, leaving a review, or sharing with a friend on your social media accounts. You can also donate on my website. Thank you again. This is BT for Truth and Shadow Podcast. You are the light in the darkness.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
It's a very strange, funny time where everybody would love to be able to be themselves, but they can't, because they must fall in line with the person in front of them.
The terrible thing about searching for the truth is that sometimes you find it.
You take the red pill. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. You stay in Wonderland. Believe whatever you want to believe.
See, the more at peace you become, the less you tolerate chaos. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you.
You want to live that kind of life? I wish you the best. I'll be on the other side somewhere.
Protecting your peace isn't about shutting the world out. It's about keeping your inner world clear enough to hear your own soul.
The truth, nothing more.